Now, where exactly is the line between law enforcement and the suppression of dissent? And when a government critic is arrested inside a courtroom and taken straight to prison, is justice being served, or is democracy itself being put on trial? That debate has erupted once again following the arrest and remand of activist, publisher, and former presidential candidate, in fact, current presidential candidate, Omoyele Sowore. Sowore was taken into custody after a federal high court judge revoked his bail and ordered his remand over a cybercrime case linked to social media posts in which he described President Tinubu as a criminal. Supporters of the government insist this is a straightforward legal matter and that no citizen is above the law. But critics, from civil society groups to opposition politicians, have expressed concern that Nigeria's democratic institutions risk appearing intolerant of criticism. The images of DSS operatives taking Sowore into custody inside the courtroom have raised fresh questions about free speech, judicial independence, and the limits of state power, and whether the criminal justice system is increasingly being used against political opponents and vocal critics.
This is not a political case. This is a criminal trial. Now, Sowore, remember the day I was here, this issue of Sowore calling the president a criminal. And I said, clearly, the DSS has the responsibility to reprimand or to ask him to retract whatever he has put in on X social media. And he was given the opportunity to retract. He did not. Now, DSS had decided to take him to court. This matter is before the court of law. As a matter of fact, he subjected himself to the decision of the court by taking his plea, one, by allowing the prosecution to call their witnesses. He cross-examined them through his lawyer. As a matter of fact, at the close of the prosecution's case, he raised a no case submission, which the court dismissed. Now, it is his turn to defend himself. So we must divorce politics from what is happening now. Now, he has see, you have alleged that you have done this. It means that you have evidence to that effect. So if you are called upon to defend yourself, what's the difficulty in that one? So if any Nigerian can be called upon to defend himself, then Sowore case cannot be exceptional. So all these fuse over Sowore trial, all this, I don't think it's necessary.
And that's the senior advocate of Nigeria, Deborah Adamson, speaking on our sister program, Newsnight, here in the studio last night. Well, for more on this, I'm joined now in the studio by the human rights lawyer and legal representative of the Take It Back movement, Abdul Karim Musa, one of the lawyers representing Omoyele Sowore, who recently resigned from the representing him. Thank you very much indeed for coming in. First of all, tell us why you resigned from representing Omoyele Sowore.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. Well, we were representing Omoyele Sowore from the beginning of the charge and the trial, but as proceedings continued, some of us in the legal team felt like the proceeding was becoming kind of hostile, and so...
You mean hostile towards Mr. Sowore?
And even some
towards
of the lawyers,
you?
Yes. And so, in order to avoid having any issues, because no lawyer wants to have issues with a judge or judges, and so we decided to resign our representation.
Right. Hopefully, if we've got time, I'll come back to that. But what exactly happened inside that courtroom from your perspective? And why do you believe the arrest and remand of your client were improper?
Well, from the inception of the matter, like I just said, Sowore had cooperated much with the court and abided by the rules of the court, appeared on all the days he was supposed to appear, but his appearance in that court was pervaded with hostility in the sense that the court, first of all, had the premonition that Sowore was recording proceedings using some of his gadgets. And so he was asked in the course of proceeding on several occasions to remove his glasses, to remove his wristwatch, and all form of directives from the court. And he felt that that was dehumanizing. And then we continued to manage the situation until the proceeding got to a point where one of the lawyers in the team was even asked to come and kneel down by the judge. And that kind of sanction does not exist within any of the laws.
Well, that sounds extraordinary.
Within any of the laws that we have. And so at that point, we felt that continue to represent Omoyele Sowore in this matter may put us at a very disadvantaged position with the judge. And some of the lawyers also felt uncomfortable appearing before the court, and so we decided to resign our representation upon the fact that we know that Omoyele Sowore has the right to represent himself as a defendant, and also probably has the opportunity to engage other lawyers who the judge may not be having that disposition towards.
Now, the court's position, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that Mr. Sowore failed to appear at a scheduled hearing leading to a bench warrant. Why shouldn't this simply be seen as the ordinary consequence of failing to comply with a court order?
Well, there are several reasons, but I'll just limit it to as few as possible. The fact of the incidents and circumstance surrounding the revocation of Sowore's bail is that on the 15th, the matter was slated for ruling of an application that had been previously heard. And so on the 15th, Sowore appeared in court, but the court did not sit. But there had not been a prior notice that the court would not be sitting. And so Sowore left and made an application for an adjournment on certain days, knowing that he would not be around for a while. He made an application. And contrary to what the SAN said on your program, that Omoyele Sowore said that the grounds of his application for an adjournment was on ill health. That's a lie. In that application did not state any grounds. It just simply stated that I wouldn't be around for a while, but I'm suggesting some dates subject to the convenience of the court. And so the court resumed on the 16th without a hearing notice to Omoyele Sowore. And the law is right that a party who failed to attend a court proceeding cannot be penalized if he had not been served with a hearing notice. In any case, the matter was coming up for a ruling, and by Section 266 of the Administration of Criminal Justice Act, a criminal proceeding can take place in the absence of a defendant if the matter is coming up for the hearing and determination of an interlocutory application. And that day, the matter was adjourned for the ruling of an interlocutory application. So the absence of Sowore on that said day could not in any way scuttle proceedings. And so we find it a bit absurd that, and then the procedure, if a defendant is absent, is to invite the sureties, because part of the conditions for his bail is that there were people who took him on bail. And so it's to invite those people to produce the defendant and then give the defendant an opportunity, the fair hearing we're complaining about. The defendant must be afforded opportunity to tell the court why he was absent and to tell the court why his bail should not be revoked as a result of his absence. None of that was done. And it forms part of the grounds that Omoyele Sowore feels that he might not get justice in that court. I saw him today and he repeated the same thing.
What I think disturbed many Nigerians was not merely the remand order, but the manner in which DSS operatives took custody of Mr. Sowore inside the courtroom. Was any law or court protocol violated by that process?
Yes, certainly. The act of the DSS is contempt of court, because in the days when court had the prestige that it ought to have, no matter how wanted a criminal is, the moment he steps foot into the courtroom, he is protected by that temple of justice. And you would see security operatives waiting for the suspect outside the courtroom if they needed to rearrest him. But what they did, and in any case, the DSS did not even have any business rearresting Sowore. The court had ordered that his bail should be revoked and that he should be sent back to prison. The people who had custodial rights over Sowore at that time was the prison warders. The DSS had no business. And so that their action of harassing and undermining the integrity of Omoyele Sowore in such commando style suggests that this is a political trial. It is not prosecution, but has transcended from the realm of prosecution to persecution.
At the heart of this case is Mr. Sowore's description of President Tinubu as a criminal. Is your argument that such language is protected political speech, no matter how offensive or controversial it may be?
Well, unfortunately, at this point, I may not be able to delve into the justification of the statement because that matter is sub judice and that is for the court to determine. But what I can say as per this is that the oxygen of democracy is criticism. And democracy is tested not with the popularity of the government, but it is when the unpopular voices are, when the government of the day has the tolerance to accommodate unpopular voices or voices that are dissent, are critical to its policies and its operations, then we can say we have a true democracy.
Yeah, but the government will argue that every single day, and I would certainly to some extent agree with them, that people sit where you're sitting and criticize the government. And they don't get arrested. So if a citizen publicly accuses a president of criminality without a court conviction, why shouldn't that attract legal consequences?
Well, first of all, it would be very limiting to determine the language that any Nigerian chooses to use in criticizing the government.
Well, I mean, if you call somebody a criminal,
yes,
that's more than just saying that he's not doing what he
was consequent upon a statement which he believed
elected to do.
It was consequent upon a statement that the president made that Sowore called him a criminal. And when Sowore was investigated, he said, I can defend the statement I made. And we are before the court, and we are saying he should be afforded the convenience to defend himself. But I have another rationale as to why, your question as to why other Nigerians can criticize and they are not being prosecuted or persecuted. Why Omoyele Sowore? The reason is simple. He's a presidential candidate.
Well, I'm not saying why Omoyele Sowore. I'm looking at the degrees of criticism. You talked about criticism in general.
Yes.
And I said that there are people who sit here. And in fact, there's somebody coming in after you who's very likely to criticize the government. But he is not getting arrested because he's not calling the president. I mean, there are allegations you make against someone, and I'm not speaking for them. I'm speaking to you as a lawyer. I mean, there are allegations you make against someone which could certainly raise hackles because it goes beyond criticism of somebody's work.
Yes, sir. You see, but then, if no matter how strongly the language Omoyele Sowore has used, there are justifications for his use of that language. Number one, President Tinubu is Omoyele Sowore's opponent, is his political opponent. You could recall the President Tinubu had made certain extreme statements against people like Atiku, people like Peter Obi in the past. And so he cannot, because he's the president now, utilize the state institutions to prosecute someone who makes similar statements against him.
So in other words, your argument is that fundamentally what is being prosecuted is political speech.
Exactly.
Right. Now, your team sought the judge's recusal. What specifically led to the conclusion that he should step aside from this matter?
Now, it is an array of issues, like I had highlighted previously, that the Omoyele Sowore felt that the court was hostile to him, and that with the way proceedings were being conducted, he would not get justice in this matter.
So do you believe that Mr. Sowore can still receive a fair hearing beyond this particular judge in the Nigerian judicial system generally?
Certainly, he can get justice, no matter how there has been an erosion.
Well, I mean, he's got justice in the past, hasn't he?
Maybe.
I mean, he's had cases where his case was dismissed or,
But that might not be necessarily justice to him. The cases he had previously, he was charged, prosecuted for a long time, and the charges were withdrawn without any compensation to him. So all the time he was coming to court, all the money he expended on mobilizing for the case, nobody is paying him back for that. And so this is what we are facing in this country, where a charge can be hung around the person's neck and then prosecuted for many years, even
and then suddenly they
unjustifiably.
drop the case and there's no compensation.
And there's no compensation.
And technically that's very unfair.
It's very unfair.
Sowore
can still get justice within the system that we have, but it's not necessarily before any particular judge. There should not be an insistence on the judge to handle a matter. If by circumstance, and judges are human beings, so the judge might have been provoked by maybe the conduct of a lawyer. But if anything interferes with the emotions of a judge while entertaining a matter, it is best, and it is not necessarily a claim that the judge is compromised or corrupt or anything, but that justice must not just be done, but must be seen to be done manifestly.
So what is he doing about that judge's refusal to recuse himself? What are the options open to him?
Well, there are a lot of options open to him, and that the application for a judge to recuse himself is not one that can only be made once. If new circumstances arise that require Omoyele Sowore to make an application for the judge to recuse himself, then he may make such application. And I believe as it is now, Omoyele Sowore has sufficient grounds to make such an application, because I told you now that the revocation, Sowore's absence was not detrimental to the proceeding of that day, because it was meant for, the matter came up for ruling. Now, upon revocation of Sowore's bail, Sowore filed an application to stay the execution of that order revoking his bail. Sowore filed an application also to set aside that order revoking his bail. And the law is simple, that when a party is challenging an order or asking for the stay of execution of an order, it behoves on the court to entertain that application and determine it one way or the other before proceeding. That application was before the court, and the court did not determine it, and rather proceeded to allow the execution of that decision. This particular act had been a subject of petition to a federal high court judge in this country, and the NJC sanctioned that judge who proceeded on a garnishee proceeding when there had been an application before him to stay the execution of that proceeding. And the NJC felt that that conduct was not proper for a judicial officer.
So there's precedent.
There's precedent.
Right.
Still arising from the Federal High Court. So this may constitute sufficient grounds for further applications. But we want to have, because we advocate for the integrity of the judiciary to be restored, and we want anything that can be done to ensure that the Nigerian people still have faith in the judiciary. It should be. And the determination of Omoyele Sowore's case should not be the sole reason why many Nigerians should begin to lose the already fast eroding confidence in the judiciary. So
that's a good point. Let me just return to that DSS issue briefly. Why do you believe they chose to pursue this matter so aggressively?
Well, I want to see that it is a dent on the integrity of the government of the day. Because while they are approaching their opponents, this is an approach to distract their political opponents. And they are using several strategies. It is from disqualifying political parties in which your opponents are, to causing chaos in different dimensions in other political parties, and for candidates who you do not have the powers or the elements to distract or disrupt their political party activities, then you now go after their person. And that's what's happening to Omoyele Sowore now. Because you see, the ADC has its own issues, all the parties are having their issues, and it becomes suspicious when the court becomes a ground where the executive uses to perpetuate some of its ambitions against political elements.
Right. Well, not to conflate matters, and just to be quite clear on where things are going, are you, well, I mean, you're no longer his lawyer directly,
with regards to this matter,
but indirectly you still are.
Yeah.
Are you seeking only the restoration of Mr. Sowore's bail, or are you ultimately asking the court to strike out all the charges altogether?
Well, there had been an application, no case submission, a submission of no
Right.
case, that the prosecution had not laid out sufficient elements of the crime that they are alleging that Omoyele Sowore had committed, and so the case should be struck out or dismissed. But that application had been heard and turned down. And so the proper thing to do is to proceed to
Right.
put our defense,
So if
assuming
this-
these issues were not existing.
Right. So if this court eventually rules against your client, assuming it continues all the way through, are you going to take this matter higher? Court of Appeals, Supreme Court, or all the rest of it?
Well, that would be within the decision of the client.
Right.
But I'm very confident that if the court decides against Omoyele Sowore, certainly the only option available to us is to advise him to go on appeal. But we hope that that does not happen and that the court sees this charge for the frivolity that it is.
Right. Now, many of Mr. Sowore's supporters, as I'm sure you're aware, see him as a victim of political persecution. Many of his critics see him as someone who deliberately courts controversy and then claims victimhood after he's courted controversy. Which of these narratives is closer to the truth? You seem to know him quite well.
Yes, the truth is that Sowore is speaking from a vintage point. He's an exposed individual who has seen what government ought to be, and he's seen the contrary in operation in Nigeria, and he has decided to commit his life and existence towards combating the injustices that are happening in Nigeria. And so you are likely to hear his voice louder and more frequently than those who have resigned and gone about their businesses and just accepted the country the way it was. And so it is his ambition towards ensuring that we have the Nigeria of our dreams, in Nigeria where everybody is treated equally, that has made him this perceived troublesome person that we all see. Because if every Nigerian being affected with the plethora of issues that we have decide to speak up, then we would all be called noisemakers. But because we go about our businesses and let them go, nobody hears our voices. So in simple terms, it's because of how frequent Sowore confronts injustices in Nigeria that we will hear his voice frequently. So he's a victim, and other narratives are just attempts by the government of the day to distract Nigerians from the essence of what Omoyele Sowore is doing.
You don't think he deliberately courts controversy?
No. There has not been any instance of Omoyele Sowore deliberately causing any controversy. There has never been a time that Omoyele Sowore on his own went to, cause chaos anywhere. He's either that he's advocating for the right of someone who's being infringed or standing up for himself against the oppression that is laid in the government of the day.
So what happens next?
Well, we hope that the application for setting aside the order of revocation is determined in favor of Omoyele Sowore, and the ruling of that application comes up on the 30th of June 2026. And so we hope that that application is decided in his favor, and then from there we would deliberate on the next steps to advise him to take.
Well, thank you very much for coming in. I think you're an impressively articulate young man, and I wish you all the very best.
Thank you for
Abdul
having me.
Karim Musa is a human rights lawyer, legal representative of the Take It Back movement, and one of the lawyers who represents Omoyele Sowore. Thank you very much indeed for coming in.
Thank you for having me.